What's up, Patreon family? This is your girl Megan from the Hood Astro Queen, and today I am here to do yet another celebrity birth chart reading. This time on none other than Lil Nas X. So, as I'm sure you guys might have known, the world has been set ablaze, pun intended, after Lil Nas X debuted his most recent single. I think it's called "Call Me by My Name." And he put out the video for it. The video depicted him on his way to heaven. He finds a stripper pole or grabs hold to a pole and quickly descends to hell. In stripper boots, okay, thigh high stripper boots. He begins to give Satan a lap dance. And then, even following that, he released a devil shoe or something like that. It's a shoe that allegedly contains human blood in it. It's a lot. So, needless to say, a lot of people are put off, disturbed, angry. I got a lot of requests, to do a natal chart reading on Nas X. So we just gonna go ahead and hop right on into it. And yeah. So Lil Nas X was born on April 9th, 1999 in Lithia Springs, Georgia. And this is this small city right outside of Atlanta. So maybe 10, 15 minutes outside of the Atlanta city limit. And I thought this was very interesting because he's actually extremely close to where I'm from. And I was like, I never knew Tony Baker voice. Anywho, okay, I thought Lil Nas X's chart was very interesting for a magnitude of reasons. But the first reason being that he has a lot of nine energy. And the number nine is ruled by Mars, as is Aries. So he has a lot of Aries energy, which makes him a very bold person. And I mean, he wears it so well. It's actually very, very telling, right? These are people who are very daring. And there's going to be a lot of things that center around these people's identity. And I always say it either goes in one polarity or the opposite. So you see a lot of people with number nine energy either being really assertive, very sure of themselves, right? Or people who really lack those things altogether. And their life's journey is going to consist of them being able to really come into themselves. A lot of these people can have identity crisis, which is also very fitting when you look at Lil Nas X and his career, the trajectory of his career and his coming out and his sexuality and all that stuff. His Aries sun is conjunct his Jupiter, which also reinforces this very dynamic, bold, in your face kind of style. These people can be very daring, very risque, very sexual, okay? But also very original. And they tend to have a really great sense of humor, very cutting edge kind of people. They're not afraid to do what hasn't been done or take things to certain places that other people may be afraid of. Very courageous people, very brave people. And with him also being a Leo North Node and having his son trining that Leo North Node, in this lifetime, there is a strong need for him to be fully actualized in terms of embracing his identity and sexuality to the fullest. These are actually, once again, very sexual people, and he kind of has the right to be that in this lifetime. And this is why he can appear to be over the top or even performative, even in the way that he showcases his homosexuality, because technically he has the right to be that way. Okay. There's going to be a lot of emphasis that these people place on creating a name for themselves. And I thought that was so interesting. The number nine deals with one's name. So does Aries. And then his latest single, which sparked all of this controversy, is literally called Call Me by My Name. So this kind of ties back into the theme of either having an identity crisis or these people making the name for themselves. I thought that was so interesting. Now, his Aries sun and Jupiter are squaring his Capricorn moon, which says a lot in terms of family dynamics, because it can speak to where Lil Nas X came from a rather strict or conservative family, especially if we're talking about like the mother. These are people who could be constantly fighting within themselves. I mean, that sun square moon in and of itself, I always say, is one of the most challenging aspects to have in astrology, just because these people very seldomly are ever really fully at peace within themselves. They're always kind of struggling or fighting to reach some or attain some level of satisfaction, but there's always going to be something that's missing. Okay, and with it being in two cardinal signs, right, like Aries and Capricorn, these people can kind of look like they're all over the place or appear to be all over the place. Like they're always doing something. They're always trying to, try something new. And it can be like a hectic kind of energy to others around them. But nonetheless, this can deal with him constantly fighting between being who he identifies with personally and suppressing it. And this is why he places a lot of emphasis on coming out and being somebody who is proud of being the way that he is. Right? He's made a lot of statements about it. He talks about it almost every time he releases a project. And like I said, especially with that sun conjunct Jupiter squaring his moon, it could have a lot to do with religion. And I thought it was very interesting considering that his father is actually a gospel singer. So you could even look at that conjunction between his sun and Jupiter as, I mean, I see this in the charts of a lot of preachers' kids or people whose, once again, father could be devoutly religious, coming from a very traditional religious family, even squaring off with that Capricorn moon. We're talking about hardcore, probably old school type of parents and that kind of situation. And this is also particularly interesting as well, considering that the controversy from this most recent video he released, a lot of that was also centered around different ideals involving religion, right? Heaven versus hell, God versus the devil, and him playing directly off of this theme of, I'm the devil, I'm going to hell. And so you could look at that as also being depicted with that sun and Jupiter in Aries squaring his Capricorn moon. And a lot of these people tend to kind of even overcompensate for that level of cognitive dissonance that they feel. So you can actually see here where it literally depicts this kind of struggle that he could have internalized and that he walks around with in terms of his own faith. And it's not lost upon me that Capricorn technically is the sign of the devil. It is, okay? Capricorn, you could even look at that as selling one's soul, which can be taken from a literal standpoint in terms of, especially if we're talking about corporations. A lot of Capricorn placements, especially if afflicted, are prone towards doing things that are done sheerly in the name of attaining money, power, status. These are people who are willing to do almost anything in order to get to where they want to go. And so with that squaring off with his sun and that Jupiter, you could even look at that as like him forfeiting and being willing to kind of put anything and everything on the line, including his own faith and religion, in order to make a statement, in order to capitalize off of things. But you could also interpret this in a more spiritual context and say that these are people who could be willing to sell their souls to the devil, like quite literally. And although the video didn't really trigger me, or just on a personal level, the way that it triggered everyone else, because I don't really personally buy into the Abrahamic concepts of heaven and hell. The symbolism in the video was definitely something that I noted. And I couldn't really get into the idea of buying a shoe with human blood in it, because it's like I'm fully aware of the purposes and all of the ritualistic uses of blood. And that's not nothing I'm willing to sign myself up for. But I mean, my personal feelings aside, this square right here, I mean, it's a valid cause for concern. And I definitely see how it could lead to a person who, and I mean, has questionable ethics and morals when it comes to certain things, right? And honestly, I think a lot of it is, once again, the overcompensation or the internalization of a lot of these lifelong struggles that he has been plagued with. But nonetheless, though, I can assure you his family probably isn't happy with this square. In fact, I can assure you his family probably isn't too accepting of his sexuality either. But once again, this square can cause for a person to overcompensate and go above and beyond. You could even look at that conjunction between his sun and Jupiter as literally going above and beyond, where you can kind of do a lot, way too much, in order to showcase who you are. Here I am. Here's my sexuality. I have arrived. And we can feel however we want to feel about it. But once again, with his son trining his Leo North Node in this lifetime, technically, he has the right to be that way. So you just kind of have to ask yourself if that's something that you can get with. You know, that's up to you. If so, cool. If not, whatever. His Capricorn moon is also forming a semi-square to Pluto, which is something else that could actually, and it rubbed me the wrong way in terms of dealing with like darker energy, darker entities, where one could open themselves up to that type of energy. Okay. So, I mean, there are some issues from a esoteric or astrological perspective for sure that I do see with this. Now, also, with that sun square moon, I also thought that was kind of interesting because almost always you see this in the charts of people who have parents who are no longer together. And sure enough, as I looked it up, his parents divorced when he was 6. Lil Nas also has his Venus at the 26th degree of Taurus. And that absolutely speaks to his artistry, his love for music. And a lot of Venus Taurus individuals actually have pretty nice singing voices. I also noticed that his Venus is forming a trine to that Capricorn moon, which deals with him working in food service at some point. I mean, also obviously the music industry. But as I looked up some of his information via Wikipedia, it stated that he worked at Zaxby's for a period of time while he was getting his career off the ground. And that is so very much Venus and Taurus trining the moon all day, working in the restaurant industry, working with food. Some of these people can go into the hospitality industry and all that stuff. Okay. Also, this could even speak to his love for, or having a kind of feminine flair, love for feminine energy, specifically wearing breasts. Okay. If you guys remember back, if you follow Nas X anyway on social media, maybe a couple of months ago, he caught a lot of flack because he posted a picture of him with silicone breasts on. And of course, you know, you had the typical sector of the black community up in arms about it, but I didn't really think too much of it. However, this trine absolutely points towards that, where a person could fantasize about having breasts, or even just as a man, he has a strong affinity for breasts or the aesthetic of a woman. So this absolutely contributes to a lot of his personal style, right? Where he can kind of switch it up. And even though Aries is a very masculine sign, which is why he also comes across in a certain demeanor, right? A lot of people thought he was straight in the beginning, and he still kind of defies that quote unquote flamboyant stereotype of a gay man. But with this trine between his Venus and his moon, he still really enjoys and really likes that feminine aesthetic as well. Also, he has his Mercury in Pisces, which could also deal with him having a deeply devoted relationship with his siblings. And this specifically puts me in the mind of his sister. Okay. I also read that while he was on the come up, he actually had a sister who used to help him out a lot. That's very Mercury and Pisces. And, you know, this could deal with a person who has a sibling who acts as a savior to them. And specifically with his Mercury sextiling his moon, this deals with his sister allowing him to live with her, which is very much also something that he spoke a lot about while he was, you know, in between jobs and trying to get his singing career off of the ground. She actually allowed him to live with her for a while. Now, as an Aquarius South node, this could point towards Lil Nas X being gay, of course, because that Aquarius lunar nodal placement, that's the LGBTQ, right? Lunar nodal axis. A lot of Aquarius South and North nodes can fall somewhere on that spectrum. But this Aquarius South node could also point towards him being a late bloomer. He could have been somebody who wanted to fit in very earlier in life. These are people who could have often been bullied. And this actually points towards him being highly active and popular on social media, and explaining why it's very hard for people to quote unquote out internet him. And I have a quote here that I found from this Wikipedia article, and it said he spent much of his teenage years alone and turned to the internet, particularly Twitter, creating memes that showed his disarming wit and pop culture savvy. Very Aquarius South Node. A lot of these people can actually go on to create careers by way of social media on the internet. A lot of social media influencers are very much Aquarian based. They can also be into astrology, which, I might go ahead and send this to him, because if you're looking for an astrologer, Lil Nas, I got you. I got you. But nonetheless, it definitely deals with him wanting to be an internet personality. And this is actually kind of what outed him a little bit too, because when he actually became famous and hopped into the entertainment industry, hence that Leo opposite polarity, because Leo does deal with the entertainment industry. A lot of people started bringing up and linking him to like a Nicki Minaj Stan account that he ran while he was on Twitter. And of course, he denied it. And I knew right away when that came out, I'm like, okay, a Nicki Minaj Stan. And not saying Nicki Minaj can't have heterosexual male supporters, but like a Stan, last time I checked, the majority of like male Nicki Minaj stans were gay men. They're part of the girls. So that was a dead giveaway for me. But anywho, this Aquarius South Node absolutely plays into that. Okay. And with, him being a Leo North Node, really it's a matter of destiny that propelled him into the spotlight, forcing him to be more confident in his abilities. He was destined for stardom, if must say. It also explains how his South Node contributed to his style, because Lil Nas X, his music, even now, but especially his initial song that put him on the map, which is Old Town Road, I believe, was far from your traditional kind of R&B slash hip hop genre that many black people tend to fit into. He actually came out of the gate doing a certain variation on country music. That Aquarius South Node, specifically with his Saturn in Taurus, points towards him taking a very experimental approach when it comes to his music and the style of music that he creates, where these people are very different, very unorthodox, and they could channel a lot of that into their artistry. So I thought that was very cool. Very cool. Very admirable as well. His Aquarius South Node also speaks to him feeling isolated from others a lot of times. And this is also reinforced with that Capricorn moon as well. These people can be very lonely. They can feel very alone. And this is also something that kind of made me look at him in a different light too. Like I said, a lot of what we see and a lot of what he shows and his antics, quote unquote, are cover-ups. Because deep down inside, Lil Nas X probably isn't as okay with himself as he wants us to believe. He has a great sense of humor, seemingly a great kind of demeanor that he puts on. But once again, with that Leo North Node and that Aries Sun conjunct Jupiter, you still have to keep in mind that it's, to one degree or another, still an act. And it's also worth mentioning that with his Uranus at the 16th degree of Aquarius, conjunct his South Node and opposing that Leo North Node, this also drives a certain level of controversy that's almost always going to be tied to his image. So another way you could look at that is, once again, him coming out as gay, but also just him being the type of person to thrive off of negative attention. And a lot of that is going to be something that afflicts his reputation, or that kind of leaves an asterisk on his star power, right? On his career, so to speak, especially with it opposing that Leo North node. Leo is one of those signs that tends to thrive off of positive attention. But once again, in opposition to Uranus, Lil Nas X is pretty much willing to go anywhere and do anything in order to gain a certain level of notoriety. And that's another reason why it's actually really hard to beat him at the internet game, because cancel culture doesn't exist. And love it or hate it, I mean, especially because we're living in the era of Aquarius, right? Saturn in Aquarius. And it's like, Uranus is in Taurus at that. So, I mean, he's going to win regardless. The best thing you can do is, if you don't really care for him or his music or his messaging, is to just not feed into it. But, controversy sells. And so he's naturally set up to know how to play this game. Now, something else I thought to be very interesting was the fact that his Venus is forming a semi-square to his Jupiter, okay, which could point to where he's going to use his music as a device or a tool to kind of lash out against the grudges that he holds with religion, okay? Or he's going to use his music, even art, as well as, you could look at this as like clothing, right? Or even to one degree or another, like the shoe line and things like that. You could look at that as it directly being a reflection of him kind of lashing out or doing this kind of counterculture against, standard or traditional religion. Now, if I put my conspiratorial hat on, right, another angle that you could approach this whole devil, call me by my name era and situation is a little bit more actually it's a lot more sinister, and it's something that honestly, because I do try my best to be objective with my readings, it had me reconsidering my initial opinion and position. Because another way to interpret Lil Nas X's sun, that sun and Jupiter squaring his Capricorn moon, is, even his own freedom being limited or constricted somehow, and particularly by forces that are more powerful than him. And hear me out, because he also has his Saturn squaring Neptune, which could also make him a slave to corporations. And I mean, it could beg the question whether, like, once again, if he's just the type of person where maybe he didn't even really want to take this route in terms of how he portrayed things and depicted things, but he felt the need to do so either in order for money or for other reasons. I mean, it happens. I know y'all know about Hollywood and some of the weird and sinister things that go on. So I thought that was kind of interesting. He also has his Mars in Virgo square Neptune, which could also point towards him once again being a slave to his job, or where he could have a lot of his own personal power constricted or removed from him. So, I mean, it gets really sinister. And you also see this in the charts of sex slaves, to be honest, or people who could be they could be forced into some sort of like servitude. And that was also disturbing. Now, you could also look at this as him really enjoying playing dress up and stuff like that, right? Where he's really into like the hair, the makeup, and, all of that good stuff. But once again, in this context, it's one of those things that make you go, And then his Saturn in Taurus is contra-parallel to his Pluto. So this is very indicative of corrupt influences in the music business, quite literally. And another thing that I do see in his chart is issues with money, or even the potentiality of conducting bad business. So if I were him, I would be very mindful of what I'm doing in order to make money, or more so even in terms of how I spend money. I actually wouldn't even be surprised if he was one of those artists where like maybe 5 or 10 years from now he'll come out and say, well, I signed a bad deal, right? Especially because he also has his Venus in opposition to that Chiron and Sag. Then he also has that Saturn squaring Neptune. So I mean, he has a lot of stuff going on to where it's like, I mean, I'd be careful if I was him. I'd be careful. I'd be really, really careful. And then with his Chiron forming a quincunx to that Saturn, that could even deal with him being in a deal that's not quite right, or where his, once again, freedom could be compromised, or where he wants to be ridded of, is that a word? Ridden, ridden or released or freed from a deal. Yeah, so this is going to be very interesting to see in terms of just the longevity of his career and how things play out in the long run. But if he ever runs into any financial issues, or if any contractual issues come to surface, remember where y'all heard that first, okay? So I didn't want to take too long for this reading. I just wanted to address some of the things that were going on, as well as just his chart as a whole. Y'all drop down in the comment section. Let me know what you think about his chart. How do you feel about the recent situation? Okay, the demon situation, the devil situation. And yeah, make sure you practice unconditional self love so that you can love others. And until the next video, I holla.